Thank you. I appreciate it. Hopefully, I could be one of those guys that he talked about, right? Just get up here and speak and not have to work extremely hard. So I want to first start off by thanking everyone for being here. Definitely appreciate you guys coming out, and I definitely want to thank PMI for allowing me the opportunity to get in front of you guys and speak today. I do want to start off with a little bit of a favor, though. I was actually out there watching like a YouTube video. I'm not sure if you guys have ever seen it before, but it's this little saying, it's like fired up, ready to go. Fired up. Is anyone in here familiar with that? So it's like a little call and response. David, I'm gonna use you as an example because you decided to sit in the front today. So it goes like this. I say fired up, and you repeat after me, fired up. Then I say ready to go, and then you repeat after me, ready to go, right? So me and you're gonna demonstrate for the room. You ready? Fired up. Ready to go. That's exactly. And I need you to do it with a little bit more enthusiasm than David did. But apparently this is supposed to really fire you up. So like we're all going to utilize it here today, and I'm hoping it helps me get fired up. Ready? So on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Fired up. Fired up. Ready to go. Ready to go. Fired up. Fired up. Ready to go. Ready to go. I seem a little fired up now. We'll see what it's like in 10 or 15 minutes, right? So my name is Tyler Luchey. I'm an author and speaker, senior project manager at Wells Fargo, and I'm here with you guys today to talk about a 5-letter word. That word being change. Thus the name of my spiel, Change Happens, the art of making change work for you. By show of hands, let me ask, who in here likes change? A couple people. Who in here has had a change happen recently, right? The change could be small, big, personal or professional. I think that we all know, right, that change does happen. So I think it's also a safe assumption to say that change itself is inevitable, right? It's something that people before us dealt with. It's something that we're dealing with now. And long after each of us have gone, expired, and left this earth, people will be dealing with change. Which brings me to the words of businessman and author Alvin Tolliver. Change is not merely necessary to life. Change is life. Got to take a minute to just sink in. Change is not merely necessary to life. Change is life. In full speaking fashion, I like to start off with a personal story about a change I experienced as a very young individual. I know I look relatively young now, but I swear it's the facials and the haircuts I get, right? I'd like to take a minute to share with you guys about a time when I was 11 or 12 years old. I moved from, at that particular time, which was Buffalo, New York, all the way down to Rock Hill, South Carolina, so the Charlotte metropolitan area. Quite cliche, they say everybody here in Charlotte is not from Charlotte, everybody's always from someplace else. So me and my family, we were from Buffalo, New York. Now hindsight is 20/20, right? And I get that some 19 years ago, my dad moving us here from Buffalo, New York was to provide a better opportunity for his kids. Doing so, what happened was I left my entire family behind. I'm not sure how many of you guys are from the northern part of the country, states such as Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania. A lot of these states are very, or at least they were, very heavily dependent on manufacturing jobs, right? And by the late 1990s, a lot of those jobs ceased to exist, right? And there really wasn't much going on in some of those states, including Buffalo. And I see some of you shaking your head, so some of you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. And truth be told, even to this day, there's still much more going on here in Charlotte, North Carolina, than there is in some of those states that I'm in. But as an 11 or 12-year-old kid, you can understand how I didn't care about any of those things. I wasn't thinking about being successful at the age of 11 and 12. What I cared about was the fact that I was having to leave my friends. What I cared about was that I was going from having birthdays celebrated with all my family, all my friends, now to only having birthdays celebrated primarily with like my dad and my brother. A little bit more personal, like my sister and I have different dads, so my sister stayed back. It's 3 of us in total. I'm the oldest, my brother, and then my sister. My sister stayed with my mom, so I even missed out on the opportunities to harass my sister's first boyfriend, right? I missed out on the opportunities to see my sister off to prom. But it's interesting how the world works because now my sister lives with me here in Charlotte. She's in the back. That is her fiance. I now get to harass the hell out of him, right? And, you know, if I'm completely honest with you guys, during that time period, I missed out on a lot, right? I missed out on a lot because I was here and I wasn't able to be there. And for a long time, missing out, it hurt me, right? It hurt me not being able to be there with my family, my friends for some of those instances. But I tell you what also it did too. it changed my perspective on change entirely. I was forced to adapt and evolve on how I view change, right? And ultimately what my goal here is in the next 30 to 40 minutes is share with you guys that perspective change, right? That mindset shift as to how I began to now view change. Over the course of the next 20, 30 minutes, apparently we were told that we need to get out of here a little earlier, so I'm gonna speed through some of these things. And I want you guys to write this stuff down because this is gonna be gold right here. Point number one that I want to talk to you guys about is understanding what change is. Point number two, learning to be an agent for change and not a victim of change. And point number three, positioning yourself to reap the benefits of change. Understanding what change is. Obviously, we're all in here, we're all older than 5 and 6. I know that we all understand by definition what change is. We're all familiar with the Wikipedia and Merriam-Webster definitions of what change exactly is. But if you would just bear with me for a little bit as I try my best to dissect and really simplify what change really is. We all deal with change, and when I asked earlier in the conversation, not everybody had their hand up as it pertains to whether or not you like change. But I disagree. I think we all do like change. And I'm here to explain that to you. And I'm going to use an example as to why I feel like we all like change. So bear with me. Let's see if I can get you guys to agree with me by the end of my session. So David, I'm using you as an example again. I know we live in a very much like plastic, contactless, Apple Pay type of society, right? But is there anyone in here still old school that carries a little cash around on them, right? David, about how much cash do you have right now? How much would you say? Just guess. Less than $20. So David, if I was to take this $20 out of my pocket and I was to give to you, will that change the cash value that you have in your pocket right now? And do you like that change? Kind of, sort of. And so if I was to pull a $100 bill out of my pocket, would you like that change? Right? Now, can I have that $20 back? Thank you. Yeah. But the point I'm trying to make is I disagree with the fact that we all don't like change. I'll give you guys another example. I really want this to kind of hit home with you guys. What's something that we do towards the end of the year? I would say probably the middle of December, maybe after Christmas season, we start thinking about some things we want to do differently in the new year. Generally, we put together these lists, things like lose weight, change jobs, make a little bit more money, right? Some of us, I want to get my kids the hell on up out of my house. Like, we start thinking about these things. What are they called? These things that we think about. Starts with an N. Somebody help me out. That's it, New Year's resolutions. And you guys are aware that New Year's resolution literally means like a change we want to happen in the new year. To say that just blanketly we don't like change is not necessarily a true statement. Again, in the scheme of trying to break down what change is, I want to talk to you guys about this. Change is really three things. All right. Change is, number one, it's inevitable, so we best learn to deal with it. Change in its raw form is either good nor bad, and it's no need for us to get worked up over it. In all actuality, what it is just growth. And number three, what gives change its desirable or less desirable designation sometimes, referred to as, oh, this was a good change or this was a bad change, is really our perspective. Because to be completely honest with you, when we talk about, or at least at the beginning, when I said who in here likes change, not everybody had their hand up. However, when I gave David the $20, he liked that change. Then when I took the $20 back, I liked that change, right? Change is not a thing that we say it's good or bad, negative or positive. It just is. And what gives it that good or bad distinction is really our perspective. And why that's important is because of this. We control our perspective, right? And our perspective is what gives change its good or bad designation. Who there controls whether or not change is bad or good? We do, because we control our perspective. So forget for just a minute of everything you guys think you know about change and just focus on these three things right here, right? Change being inevitable, change not necessarily good or bad, and what gives power to whether or not change is good or bad is our perspective. So knowing this, I present to you like two things we can do with this knowledge, right? And the goal of the objective is for us to continue to compound. This is like a 401k. The idea is for it to like grow over the course of a couple of years. So we're going to be growing as it pertains to change over the course of the next 20 or 30 minutes. Right? I want to talk to you guys now about learning to be an agent of change and not necessarily a victim of change. Because again, we talk about how change is inevitable. We talk about how change is really ultimately just growth. And we talk about how our perspective teaches us and gives power to whether or not change is viewed as negative or bad per se. When I was, again, referring back to that story, when I was 11 or 12 years old, I was very much a victim of change. Us moving from Buffalo down to Charlotte, North Carolina area, I looked at it as completely like change was my enemy. Change has got me here from Buffalo, where I was with my friends and my family, to now I'm here, Charlotte, North Carolina. I don't absolutely know anyone. What is it about change that allows us sometimes to be these victims of change? When I say the word victim of change, what exactly comes to mind? What are some things that you guys think about? And what differentiates someone between being a victim of change and someone that is a change agent? Control, what else? I'm sorry, say it again? Involvement. What? Attitude, I like that. Who said attitude? Raise your hand. I thought it was you. Where are you from originally? Because when I was given the northern references, I feel like you were shaking your head. Are you from up north? Okay, bam, there we go. I knew there was a connection there. So I'd argue that it's mindset, right? And the reason why I say that is this. Your mindset dictates whether you are or whether you're playing the part of a change victim and or a change agent. People with the mindset of a change victim generally have these two things in common. Number one, they believe change is their enemy, which is what I believed at the age of 11 or 12. Number two, they're reactionary, meaning as opposed to trying to create change, they spend their lives reacting to what change has already happened to them, right? It kind of gives them this woe is me type of attitude because they spend their lives reacting to change as it and when it happens. Versus someone who has a change agent or is an agent of change type of mindset, the viewpoint or the mindset or the attitude that they have is this. Number one, they believe that change is growth. Now, I'm not necessarily saying to be a change agent, you have to like growth, right? Because we all know and can attest to the fact that every instance or chance we've had or growth that's happened over the course of our life isn't something that we enjoyed and that we like. But I also think that we can agree that, generally speaking, we come out better on the other end of growth than we are when we go into it, right? So change agents view change as opportunities for growth. And also, too, change agents are what I like to call creators of change. They own change, and because of their perspective on change, right, they spend their time creating change. If you look at change as an opportunity for growth, and you understand that change's designation, whether it be good or bad, is based off of your perspective, you're empowered then to enact change, create change, because you want to continue to grow. So you want change to happen in your life. Interesting quote here. Lesson to me, never do words in yellow, right, because I can barely read it. Every change in our life makes us bitter or better. Change can break us or make us. The choice is ours on whether or not we want to become a victim or a victor. I want to share one more quick story with you guys. I want to visually drive home this point of change victims versus change agents. Last month, I had an opportunity to go to Corfu, Greece. I was in Corfu for about 5 days. I was there for a wedding. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with where Corfu is, but it's a little, Corfu, Greece, but it's an island. It was about like an hour or so planes ride away from Athens, right? So we were there for a wedding. We were there for 5 days, and it really gave me an opportunity to kind of like see the city, right? See the city, try the Greek food, which, by the way, I think is amazing. I swear I had promised, like, I had a whole workout regimen and everything. I was like, I'm going to come in front of these people, I'm going to be fit. And then I ended up going to Corfu and coming back and it's like, forget it, you know? So the food there it's amazing, right? And so one of the days, myself and my girlfriend, we spent on the beach. So she's laying out on the beach chairs, and I'm out in the water. So if you guys could just visualize with me, I'm in the water, probably at this particular time, like hundreds of miles from anything United States related, not thinking about work, and I'm 25 or 35 feet away from my significant other. Best place on earth, right? And as I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, the water is roughly up to my shoulder, right? And I'm looking out into the sky. I'm thinking about life, thinking about the things I'm going to want to do next, right? And I notice I'm like swaying back and forth. What's happening is like the waves, although, subtle, like they're nothing like Wilmington Beach or like Myrtle Beach waves. They're like a lot nicer and more calmer, but it's still, I'm swaying back and forth. And, and all I'm attempting to do is like think, and I'm in deep thought, and every once in a while I'm like losing my footing, and it's just making for a complicated situation, right? And then I think to myself, I say, you know what I'm going to do? I said, I am going to anchor in here just a little bit. I'm going to spread my toes and my feet and kind of dig them into the sand. And I'm going to spread my hands out a little bit. Now, what I didn't necessarily stop the waves from crashing into me. But what I did was kind of stop allowing those waves to kind of throw me off. And now I'm able to think more clearly and calmly. I'm not having my thought process interrupt by some waves crashing me off, having me sway back and forth. And it's in this probably like 5 or 10 minutes that I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I realize how symbolic that experience was of just life and change in general. And what I mean by that is this, right? So if we compare that ocean to life, right? Big, grand, sometimes depending on the situation we're going through, feeling like it's never ending. And those waves that were very subtly kind of crashing into me, if we compare that to, or liken that to change, right? That's how change works, doesn't it? Change is constantly crashing into you. Sometimes it knocks you the hell over. Other times it's very subtly just kind of pushing you, allowing you to sway back and forth. And ultimately really kind of almost, change tries to come in and dictate to you where it wants you to go within life. And it got me to thinking about this concept of change victims versus change agents, right? Understanding how life is kind of like how I was in that moment in the water of sometimes having to just spread your feet, dig your feet into the sand, spread your arms a little bit, right? And again, you're not necessarily stopping change from happening, but what you're doing is you're no longer allowing for change to dictate what happens to your life. Change is now moving around you. And to me, visually speaking, that kind of summarizes what I mean when I say things like being an agent of a change as opposed to being a victim of change. All this stuff ties in together. We initially started talking about what change was, right? Understanding that change is inevitable and, change is growth and, our perspective gives power to change. And we kind of navigated into like learn to be a change agent as opposed to being a change victim. And lastly, but not least, I want to talk to you guys about positioning yourself to reap the benefits of change. The reason why I feel like this is important is because of this. It's one thing to understand like what change is. That's cool, right? It's another thing to commit upon leaving here to be change agents. But it's a whole nother thing to be able to learn to put ourselves in position to reap the benefits of change. Because ultimately that's what it's about, right? Whether it be personally, change that's happening in your life, whether it be professionally, I heard you mention being in change management. It's all about putting yourself, your team, your colleagues, your loved ones in positions to reap the benefits of change. Again, I'm a very visual person. Growing up as a kid is kind of how I best learned. So a lot of times when I talk, it's full of like visualizations, right? Again, I'm gonna use another like a UK reference, but I've been over the past couple of years traveling back and forth a lot to UK. I generally leave from New York City and I travel to either London or Manchester, England. I do some business over there, also go over there on vacation, and also too, my girlfriend lives over there right now currently as well, so back and forth a lot. Something else about me too is I get motion sickness. I don't like riding on roller coasters, and I don't really like flying on planes. Like, I swear to you, like I get stopped every time going through security, right? I end up signing up for TSA pre-check because I got sick of it, because I'm containing so much Dramamine. They're always having me open it up, check to see I'm not transporting something else, right? But I get motion sickness and I hate it. Like, there's nothing like for me being sick to my stomach. I was at a friend's birthday party a year or so back. We were in New York City and I'm on a boat and I'm again with my girlfriend, right? And I'm rushing her to get out of the hotel because they said it was like, yo, if you're not here by this time, this boat takes off without you. I'm so busy rushing her that I forget my Dramamine. So like here it is, like I'm on the boat. I'm probably about it doesn't take long for it to kick in. For me, I'm like 15 minutes into the boat ride, and already I start feeling horrible. I mean, you know it's bad when it's like you're in the middle of the Hudson River now. You're in the middle of the Hudson River, which isn't by any means someplace that you want to go take a dive in, right? And I'm seriously contemplating to myself, like, yo, like, I am about to jump off this boat and swim to shore. Like, my stomach is hurting that bad. One thing I've noticed in just my travels to UK, and where I'm going with this is this. I noticed that the flight to UK is always about an hour or so shorter than the flight coming home. I could never figure out why that was. I'm like, man, I don't understand this. Like, I hate flying on planes. If there's any way for me to fly a flight that's less time, I do that. But every time I look for these flights, man, I keep seeing the same thing. Flight there, flight back, about an hour or so differential. So I started researching it. I started saying, like, what is going on here? Like, do I just need to pay more money for a flight? Is this a cheap airline that I'm flying on? What is the case may be? And then upon my research, I found this. Planes traveling from west to east move faster because of something called like push factor. And so what push factor is, for planes that are traveling west to east, they travel in what are called jet streams. So these jet streams are like westerly winds that travel from west to east, right? And they're at altitudes of aircrafts. So what these aircrafts do is they fly in these jet streams, get pushed along, ultimately saving, right, both time and fuel costs, right? And apparently these westerly winds and jet streams go from west to east. Thus my trip from New York City to UK. Same thing doesn't happen on the way back. Another example kind of reminds me of my first time learning to drive a car. My dad used to tell me, when we were doing things such as like going downhill or whatever, like it's okay for me to take my foot off the accelerator, right? And because of the fact that I'm going downhill, what's happening is like I'm leveraging this car going downhill to keep my car traveling at a relatively distant speed. So what does all this mean and why is all this important? What I wanted to get across to you guys here in the course of the next couple of minutes is I want to talk to you guys about the push factors of change, right? Those things that, regardless as to whether you understand what change is, regardless as to whether or not you're a change agent and not a change victim, I want to talk to you about those jet streams that are at altitudes of change agents that are going to help you reap the benefits of change. I call them the 2 Ps. The 2 Ps are plan and prepare. And neither of which are like foreign concepts to us. We plan to go out to eat. We plan how we spend our money. You guys even planned to come here today, right? Football season started last week. I don't know about you, Dave, but I've been planning for that since last February, right? Go Buffalo Bills. So let me ask you a question. If we spend so much time, energy, and effort planning for our next job, planning how we're going to spend our money today, I bet you all of us got plans for what we're going to do when we leave here today, right? Why don't we take time and effort and plan how we're going to deal with change? I'd probably go so far as to say that planning to how we deal with change is equally as important, if not more important, than some of those other things I mentioned. I've been planning for football season, Dave. I've been planning to go to Super Bowl. But for the past, I don't know how many years, the Buffalo Bills have been letting me down. So to be completely honest with you, my time probably would be better spent planning for things such as change. Just real quick, don't want to spend too much time harping on planning and preparing, but something my uncle used to say to me all the time coming up as like a kid. He used to talk to me all the time about this word called unforeseen contingencies, right? He used to tell me all the time, he used to be like, Tyler, like unforeseen contingencies. Something happened, like, I get into an accident, overspent some money, bought some shoes I didn't have any business buying. He used to harp to me, unforeseen contingencies. And at the time, I just took it for what it's worth, right? Now my uncle's like dead and gone, and what happens sometimes after like our loved ones pass, we start thinking about those things that they said to us that at the time we kind of like half paid attention to, but now like mean the world to us, right? And I realized that like, man, like in all honesty, like what he was actually getting me ready for was change, right? Because if I'm thinking about things such as unforeseen contingencies, and I'm known and acknowledge the fact that change is inevitable, change is growth, I want to be a change agent as opposed to a victim of change, right? Thinking and planning through and preparing for change is what he had been saying to me my entire life. Unforeseen contingencies, planning and preparing. So I think we all can attest to the fact, or all can remember a time when we've had an opportunity, right? And maybe at this particular time you weren't thinking about my definition of change. You weren't thinking about being a victim of change or being a change agent. Opportunity had just been presented to yourself, right? And maybe at the conclusion of that opportunity, you felt, you know what? I don't really feel like I took as much of advantage of this opportunity as I probably could have. Like, we all probably have those examples, right? Even if we think back to when we were younger, about opportunities, chances that have came our way, and for whatever reason, right, we weren't prepared for them. And what ended up happening as a result, we didn't take complete and full advantage of that opportunity that was presented to ourselves. So subconsciously, we may and may not have known it, we're change agents and created this change. Maybe it was networking, mingling, joining some of these connection networks like I know like Wells Fargo has, Bank of America has, putting yourself out there, and all of a sudden presented to you as an opportunity for another job. We all know how it works here, right? Like hiring manager, somebody says, hey guys, I have a job I think you'll be relatively good for, why don't you take a look at it and apply for it, right? And then what happens after that is we get an opportunity for a job interview. You can't necessarily test this, but we at least all know, I know it's nobody in this room, right? But we all know someone who that was their situation, they had an opportunity for a job, and they bombed on the job interview, right? They did everything right as far as understanding what change is, being a change agent, not a change victim. But the thing that they did not do, they didn't plan and prepare. And ultimately what that resulted in is loss of opportunity. So as we transition on, and everything is about like compounding on change, right? I don't want you guys to think that one thing is more important than the other. We kind of started at what I like to feel is the ground level and talked about what change was and talked a little bit about change victims versus change agents. But this is equally as important, if not more important, right? Understanding how to put yourself in position to reap the benefits of those change. And the answer to that, the push factor, the jet streams of positioning yourself to reap the benefits of change are the two P's, plan and prepare. A couple other points I'm thinking about before I kind of wrap up today. I know it's getting close to the evening. If you're like me, you had something and you're feeling a little like sluggish, I actually kind of want to go home and go to sleep, right? But I want to hone in and talk about probably another handful of different things before I let you guys out of there, right? And I want you to understand, too, that although the title of what I've been talking about today is Change Happens, the art of making change work for you, right? What I'm really wanting to do right now, based off everything that we've been talking about, is really transition how we feel about change. And I want to take or go at it from like a different angle in the last like 4 or 5 minutes as I'm speaking to you guys. I talked with you guys briefly about my experience, right, as an 11 or 12-year-old boy, relocating from Buffalo to Rock Hill, South Carolina, the Charlotte metropolitan area. And I've openly admitted to you guys, during that space in my life, I very much was a victim of change, right? Even in here talking to you guys now, I'm thinking about that moment, right? The drive from Buffalo to Charlotte is like 11 hours, 10 and a half if you have a lead foot, right? And in that car, some 19 years ago, there was 3 people. And I'd argue that in that car, some 19 years ago, one of those 3 people was a change agent. One of those people in that car understood what change was, right? They understood that change was inevitable. They understood that change was perspective, right? So maybe moving wasn't necessarily a bad change. Maybe it was a good change. It's based off their perspective, right? Not based off someone else's perspective or what someone else is telling them about the change they're getting ready to make. I'd also argue that that change agent that was in that car, right, was taking it upon himself to be a creator of change, not be a victim of change. I said to you guys earlier today about the economy in Buffalo and what it was back then and what it is now in some of these states, right? That's why we hear all the time people talking about bringing the jobs back, the jobs been going for a long time. So you guys see what I'm talking about, right? I'd also argue this point about that trip some 19 years ago with those 3 people in that car. I'd argue this. Not only those 3 people in that car was one of them a change agent and did the things that I mentioned earlier, right? Well, that person that was in that car with us put himself in position to reap the benefits of that change. And what I mean by that is this. So that person that was in that car, and by now you guys should have figured out who that change agent was, right? It wasn't me, it wasn't my brother, it was my dad, right? That person will ultimately move on to own and operate his own mortgage brokering business. That person will move on to retire a little early, and that person will move on to eventually become a part-time real estate investor. And I would argue that that decision some 19 years ago indirectly results in the person you see before you today. I'm not sure I'd be up here in front of you guys talking to you if that change agent didn't make that decision earlier today. So I know when I started, I talked about the art of making change work for you. A lot of it was geared around the transitioning about how you feel, but I want to add one other thing to the pot, right? Being a change agent, conquering change isn't really just about you, is it? Because I can guarantee you, and I don't know all of you personally, we're all dealing with change, man. And honestly, there's changes that are going to happen throughout the duration of the year, right? There's changes that you're thinking about right now that you're anticipating, maybe trying to avoid or, move to the side or whatever the case may be. I want to challenge you, leaving from this room, to commit to being a change agent. Reason why that is important is not only for your sake, right? But for the sake of the people that come after you. Because the thing I realize about life, the thing I realize about change, and the thing I realize about so many other things is that decisions that we make indirectly impact people we care about. So, to kind of sum up everything I'm talking about as it pertains to change, I want to say these couple of last things and I'll let you guys go, right? We know and understand, and I've been harping on it the entire time, about what change is and what change isn't. We know change is inevitable, right? We know change are opportunities for growth, right? Let's not label it as good or bad. Let's own the fact that our perspective gives way to that power, right? And that distinction of how we classify change. Not someone else, you do. We've talked about the importance of being change agents versus change victims, right? We also talked about how change agents have the power to create change. We talked about reaping the benefits of change, right? And the push factors of change agents planning and preparing. I want to leave you with this final thought, is that although a lot of what we talked about centers around you guys, and I want you guys to leave here to commit to being change agents, right? Because this world needs more change agents, right? We need people who are going to leave from this room and own change, right? And stop allowing for change to dictate what it is that we do. But I believe that you guys owe it to the people that you love and care about the most to conquer change. Because you conquering change ultimately could change the trajectory of someone else's life. So with that being said, I want to thank you guys for your time. I appreciate it, and you guys have a great rest of the day.
And we're okay with it. So I wanted to take the opportunity on behalf of our PMI Metropolitan chapter. Tyler, thank you very much for speaking to us today, and please accept this as our small gift to you.
Embracing of change. My story's similar to yours, so we had some of the same life experiences, which has kind of thrown us into change at a young age, and that's kind of carried over into adulthood and some of the same stories.
But how did you feel about today's presentation?
It was great.
You liked it?
I loved it. Yeah, it was awesome. Thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate it.